All right, here they come. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Katrina McAfee. I'm the Director of Growth Marketing here at A2. We're going to give it just a few minutes for people to get logged on. And we are officially, this is an official part of the Analytics in Action series, so we're calling this our spin-off edition. So thanks for joining us. Our fun question, we're still going to have one of those, is what is, that you can remember, the first piece of technology you ever used? And we're leaving the definition of technology up to you. Hal, do you want to share what yours was?
Yeah, my first piece of technology was actually an old Samsung PC. It was an IBM clone that I got when I was about 8 years old. It was a command line running MS-DOS 3.1, and I used it. I actually started programming in GW Basic when I was about 9 years old, as a means to become popular at school, which I don't know if that helped or not, but it was fun learning.
I mean, I imagine if it was new and you were the only one that knew how to use it, it would have made you very popular.
Yeah, you know what? I was ahead of my time.
Yeah,
What
there was
about you, Bill?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I didn't start coding until 11. No, I'm kidding. I never really started coding at all, but I was going to say there was a kid that I went to school with. It he knew how to program a little bit in DOS and Basic and stuff like that. So he was like, we used to make videos, like, it's when video cameras, like the big ones, like first came out. So we would, like, all our school projects, we would do videos, and like he was the editor, and he used to have to do the intro and outro things, like to do the credits and stuff like that, and these big block letters and stuff like that. That was his job. So it won him a few friends. So I don't know how it worked out for Hal, but for this guy, it was pretty good.
Right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So you are here for getting data and insights out of NetForum. Doesn't have to be hard. And we have Bill Conforti, our SVP of Strategy and Solutions at Association Analytics. I'm going to hand it over to him to get started.
All right. Thanks, Katrina. Yeah, so this is like a not quite the analytics in action, although there's some actions that we'll all be able to take from this. So we're gonna talk about NetForum. So we have kind of like a niche audience here. So we'll commiserate a little bit. We'll discuss some solutions that are outside of NetForum. We'll discuss some things that are inside of NetForum as well. And all this is going to be in kind of a conversational format. So we've got a good sized group, but not as big as an analytics in action. So I want to encourage everybody to participate, right? So it'll be a conversation between Hal and I, but really welcome your input and your questions and suggestions and all of that as we go through. All right. So I'm Bill Conforti, Senior VP of Strategy and Solutions with A2. So I work with a lot of clients and prospects, many of which are NetForum users. Right, so I do data strategy, engagement modeling, data governance type consulting, in addition to internal stuff with A2. But NetForum customers make up a plurality, right? Not a majority, but bigger than any other AMS that we work with. So have a lot of conversations around NetForum, but I'm definitely not a NetForum expert, which is why we've invited Hal to join us today. So he is an expert in NetForum. He's in charge of IT as well as marketing in his association, which is pretty awesome, I think. So I won't tell you everything about Hal. I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself.
Hey, thanks, Bill. Hi, everyone. My name is Hal Nesbit. I'm the SVP of Information and Outreach at the American Society of Nephrology. As Bill mentioned, I sort of oversee a multidisciplinary team that includes IT, web development and design, marketing and communications, and sort of the technology overlap of all those teams. So really, I guess my unofficial title is the head geek, because I'm dealing with all the different systems and just kind of hold all the pieces fit together.
Awesome. Thanks, Hal. I think this is probably more geeks per cap, on average than we get on our usual webinars. I think you'll be at home here today. So, okay. So really quick, a couple of things that are coming up. We have I think it's going to be a really good session coming up on June the 13th. This is our engagement panel, or the engagement revolution panel, as Katrina has named it. This is going to be 4 experts plus me, right? We're going to have represented from Feather, from Clouder, from Prop Fuel, and from Worker BTV. So these are all companies that are really invested in helping you engage your members better. So there'll be a lot of good content there. Encourage everyone to join that session if you can. That is again June 13th at 1 p.m. So it's a little bit off of our usual time slot there. So what are we going to talk about today? Pretty straightforward, right? So we have a little bit of introductory material, not much. We'll do one poll. We're going to have Hal a chance to tell you about ASN, right? Nephrology, what the heck is that, right? Everybody, he's going to tell us about that. We're going to look at three things, right? How it was, right? So kind of what they're using Acumen, right? So, we sell Acumen, and you guys probably know that. But so how it was, how it is now, and then we're going to look ahead to some of the things that Hal and his team are going to want to do in the future, right? I think there's a lot of good material in there that we can all, take away or take back to our home associations. We're going to have pro tips with Hal, of course, and we'll have Q&A at the end. So who is A2 Association Analytics? Primarily we're, for purposes of this conversation, we're the developers of Acumen analytics platform. And so Acumen does a lot of things, but one of the things it does really well is extend the capabilities of your AMS. So if there are difficulties with getting certain types of data out of your AMS and into reports and into the right hands, communicated in the right way and so forth, that can be a big challenge. And that is, I don't know if it's the primary, but it's, really one of the very top reasons that we developed the product. So Hal has been very successfully implementing Acumen, and he's going to share some of those tips with you, as well as a lot of things that you can do with NetForum, outside of Acumen. So we do services with that. We have, of course, out of the box integrations, everything that's going to help you integrate with those source systems, aggregate that data, and then make sense of it, right, with some visualizations. Okay, so let's get to our poll questions. Only one today, and I think it's quite appropriate for today's conversation. So thinking about NetForum, right, which of these best represents your biggest challenge? I say challenges, I said challenge to getting useful data and insights from NetForum. So we're going to change a little bit from challenges to challenge, because this is a single select poll, and I want to get some sense of where we are as an audience. If you are selecting other, if you can tell us in the chat what you think your choice would be. And speaking of chat, while you're putting your choices in, yeah, these choices were generated 100% by ChatGPT. All right, so I was thinking about how can we do this, and we don't really have an AI section in this webinar, so I wanted to just do this as just to mess around a little bit. But I put it in. It came out with something that was, I don't know, 4 or 5 paragraphs long. I said, okay, well, can you make this into a concise list? And this is the list, including the actual descriptions that fully AI developed, but I think they're quite accurate. So okay, so we have, let's see, most popular answer is reporting and analytics, which is not a surprise, considering this this webinar and this audience. So that's a little over 50%. So majority said reporting and analytics. A lot of people also, over 30%, said data quality and cleanliness. 15%, right, just under 15 said data structure and integration, and just 3% said training and support, right? So a couple of answers there. So reporting and analytics, data cleanliness and quality, and data structure and integration, right? So those are, Greg says no one cares about security, right? I bet Hal does, right? Maybe it's not his
taken care of.
maybe it's not his number one concern or challenge, but that's something as well. So reporting and analytics, data cleanliness and quality, and then structure and integration. So Hal, what are your thoughts? Any big surprises there?
No, honestly, that kind of matches up with what we've seen at ASN. I mean, at the end of the day, when we have these systems, we're looking for reporting analytics to, drive our decision making. However, in order for that to work, we've got to have clean data underneath. I think the biggest challenge that we've had at ASN is doing just that. we get a large influx of users every single year based around our big annual meeting called Kidney Week. And a lot of our, so we're a doctor-based organization, a lot of the doctors or their assistants will not remember their password and just create new accounts. And it drives us crazy. Oftentimes, they'll have different registrations. It's all tied back to one individual. We then have to do a ton of cleanup. We have to do a ton of data integrity checks. It's a constant cat and mouse game to make sure that we are getting that data clean in order to drive our analytics to make sure that they are accurate.
Right. So you get a big influx of new members, some of which are actual new members, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Exactly. Okay. All right. Very good. So let's move on then. I want to give you a chance to tell us about ASN.
Yep. So ASN, we're a medical subspecialty society around nephrology, which full disclosure, when I first applied for the position, I didn't know what nephrology was. I had to Google it, but it is the study of kidneys. So our vision at the ASN is a world without kidney diseases. We are primarily a membership-based organization that provides educational opportunities for physicians, kidney doctors, but our membership actually includes anyone working in the kidney space. For example, nurses, dialysis technicians, basic scientists, and researchers, as we're actually involved in pretty much everything to do with the kidney. From board certifications to research grants to patient advocacy. We've got about 20,000 members from 140 different countries. The majority of our members are practicing. They're going to be practicing physicians or nurses. But we do have a fair amount of students or trainees, which comprises about 30% of our member base. So it's people that are in any one of the 3 phases of nephrology training, whether to become a doctor or perhaps a nurse, et cetera. Staff-wise, when I first started ASN back in 2007, we had 15 employees when I was hired. I was actually hired as a web developer to redo their website, and that kind of expanded. My role at ASN expanded as the organization expanded. We now have about 70 employees, so we have done a lot of growth, but we actually still like to keep this kind of small team agility in the sense that we're not weighed down with a whole lot of bureaucracy. I think we're in a pretty good sweet spot right now where we can still move around, make changes, especially system-wise. Which really allows us to do a big phrase at ASN is we do less with more. I'm sorry.
More with less.
More with less. Not that, switch that up. But yeah, more with less. We've got a good staff around us, but we are still able to make changes in a pretty rapid deployment in order to adjust with our market, we adjust with our customer base, and adjust how they want to consume our services.
Awesome. Wow, that's really comprehensive. I was thinking I might have some follow-up questions, but I think you nailed it there. So that's about ASN, just to kind of give you some context into things we'll talk about going forward. So with that, I'm going to move to our first section. As I mentioned, we're going to break it into how it was, how it is, and how it's going to be. Right? We're going to look forward. So as we start off with how it was. Let's start with this, Hal. So tell me about, with respect to NetForum, like with ASN, like how long has NetForum been around, and like what is your relationship, right? How would you characterize that? We talk with a lot of customers that hate's a strong word, but they look forward to moving on from their current AMS. I don't necessarily sense that you were in that camp, but tell us about how long you've been using NetForum and kind of how you feel about it.
Yeah, so we ASN implemented NetForum in 2007, which is actually the same year that I started. They had made the decision to migrate from, they were using TIMS or the TMR system, if you guys are familiar with that. So they completed the migration about 2 or 3 months before I came on board at ASN. So I didn't really have a choice embedded in, and to be fair, I actually had never heard of NetForum or Ability at that point. So I came in with the system. I had to learn it along with our staff at the same time. But I will say I personally love it, particularly the extensibility around it. So obviously I'm an admin. I've got a toolkit license. So I've got the ability to customize the system to meet our needs. I like to tell people that ASN is we are complex, which is a polite way to put it. But we often have very specific needs that aren't necessarily met by some of our other technology vendors. Who want us to change the way that we do things to meet the system. NetForum really allowed us to change and modify and customize the system to meet our business needs, which I thought was great.
Awesome. Yeah. So So one question for the audience, right? So you said 2000, was it 7?
So
Okay. Who's been using NetForum for longer than that, like prior to 2007? Just drop your first year that it was implemented at your association, or the first year that you personally started using it, if that's all. I just want to get a sense. And so the second is a question for Hal, which is put you on the spot a little bit here. Tell me, or tell us about a specific customization that you remember that was kind of a win for you as the admin for NetForum there.
Well, there were a lot of data points that didn't exist that were medical subspecialization society specific. Big one. Particularly around something like board certifications and some of the information that we do collect. So the ability to, as I mentioned earlier, I oversee marketing and everything else. I'm very interested in collecting advanced demographics. A lot of it did not exist in the baseline NetForum system. So in order to customize it, it was honestly very, very easy. I was able to go into the toolkit, create the database schema, create the forms, and it automatically plugs into their web services layer called XWeb. So we could immediately feed it out to external systems as well, which has been really, really useful.
All right. So we see 2003. Okay, that might be the winner so far. A Vectra. All right. Yeah. So there's been through a few name changes and stuff over time. All right. Okay. So let me start. Let me start here. I think this is something that is pretty universal to every, and it's not only a NetForum thing. It's really for just about every AMS and every technology focused professional that we talk to. And that's something that I call the reporting bottleneck, right? So IT gets all of these requests and you're kind of inundated with reports. So tell me about that. Has that been, or was that a problem for you at ANS?
Yeah, 100%. So especially when we were a little smaller. So at the time, especially when the first 2-3 years when I was at ASN, I was the only person who knew anything about SQL. I was the only person who could really understood database queries, et cetera. So every single report request would kind of have to go through me. Obviously, I've got other responsibilities, and it ended up, I mean, I used to spend probably about 30 to 40% of my time each week just writing SQL queries and reports. It's a time suck. It's not efficient, and I end up, me personally, becoming the bottleneck because I have to, get this information to all these other teams that are waiting on me to do it. Some of the query requests that we got, they were often very similar, but the requester would want to change 1 or 2 things. So I would then have to create basically duplicate my work, create a whole new query just to match this one data point, and it was something. Took up a lot of time.
All right. So you were at 30 to 40%, and about how much time do you spend doing that stuff now?
That has gone way down. So probably about 2 to 5% now. All of our Acumen pretty much takes care of all of the scenarios that we would be looking for in a regular, baseline situation. The key was Acumen's ability to be able to change, for the non-technical user, to change data points. So as I mentioned, when I'm writing queries, it's often they just want to change 1 or 2 things to fit their specific scenario. Acumen allows the user to do that. So this has been, it's been a boon for me. And since I'm not rewriting queries, I'm not duplicating my work, and the non-technical user can sit there and play around with different scenarios to not only get the information they want, but do a bit of forecasting as well. So it's been really good. So yeah, I still do a couple here and there when we're looking for really advanced stuff or perhaps emerging programs, but that's down to about 2 to 5% of my time now, from 30 to 40.
Awesome. And what do you do with that extra time? Is like prop your feet on the desk and
I crack a beer or 2. I mean, honestly, it gives me more time to focus on strategy. So overseeing all the departments, I want to have an integrated strategy combined across all the things that we do, making sure that we're leveraging the proper synergies. Whereas before, I had so much time, we often spent way too much time just focusing on the tactical because we had to scramble a bit. This really does allow us to take a step back, use Acumen as well for some of our business intelligence, but just take a more strategic approach to everything across the board.
All right, great, awesome. Okay, so let's move to the idea of integration and data quality. I think those are like the second and third, or maybe depending on how we want to combine things. Tell me about that. Was that a big issue or a big problem for your association, this single source of truth, that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Even within NetForum. So we do try to, we use NetForum as basically the overarching system of note, but we needed the single source of data truth. We had issues with disjointed data stores, as well as dynamic data within NetForum. So one of the biggest challenges that we actually used to have is we would struggle with the very simple question of how many members did we have in year X? And that was so hard to answer because the data itself is changing. NetForum's NetForum's a living database. So the numbers that we had were affected by things like when someone got flagged as deceased, with soft delete, when individuals got merged, et cetera. So it was just all over the place. We needed to establish protocols. And we also had other issues where people were using different modules within NetForum that touched on membership numbers and user numbers. For instance, the CRM module, as well as the membership module, they would pull different counts. And because we didn't have the single source of data truth, we would get different numbers based on who was running it, what module they were using, and what time of year they were running it, since the data itself was changing.
Interesting. So this was a kind of a new thing for me that I learned in our conversations was the difference between CRM and membership module. So again, I have two questions. One is for the group. How many of you are using both of those? I know, all of you are probably using membership, but the CRM module in particular, is that highly used? I'm curious. And then question for you, Hal, which is what are some of the specific problems that result from doing that? Is it just like, is it duplicate records primarily, or is it other things?
Yeah, primarily duplicate. So the CRM module is basically used to house any user information and all the customer relationship management. That's kind of the central point that most of our staff members focus on, whereas membership is membership specific. As I mentioned, we get the large influx of new users each year when they don't remember their password, they don't know how to click the forgot password link, so they create a new account. Usually their assistants will often buy new memberships so they can get the discount to whatever event that they were registering for. Well, this causes a huge issue, because even when we identify the data, we merge it. So now the CRM will have one individual with two memberships. So completely throwing off our count, causing issues, honestly, all across the board. So it's an ongoing issue that we still struggle with.
I see. Yeah, that's tough. Okay, so one more question for the group. If anyone has, like Hal mentioned a few things, right? The deceased members, right? This idea of a soft delete. What are the issues, or what are the processes that you are part of, or things that you run into that cause data quality issues in NetForum? Right. So I'm going to open that up to the group. If anyone has something that hasn't been mentioned so far, I think it would be interesting for all of us to hear about it. And and if there's like sort of a some context or some story about your association, feel free to give us that as well. All right. Good. All right. So let's go to something else, which is the broader, right? So we kind of got a little bit in the weeds with data quality and integration issues. I'm going to take it up a notch now and look more broadly, and let's talk about the decisions, right? I mean, Acumen is a business decision-making tool, primarily. And so how did ASN make decisions before?
So they were often done just by anecdotal evidence, looking at precedent of things that have happened before, as opposed to adjusting for trends, and sometimes hunches, unfortunately. And I know that's very natural when you're used to something, but we experienced such rapid growth between 2007 and currently that a lot of the hunches and precedents that applied before simply they didn't apply anymore. The decision-making process that we're using wasn't growing along with our member and user base. A couple examples. So we often we would give away free memberships to groups outside of our primary demographic, thinking that they would do a paid renewal at the end of the free term. That makes sense. It's the standard free sample, that sort of thing. What we were finding it hard to quantify if that was actually providing real retention and real turnover and conversions like we wanted it to. And it turns out once we kind of got some more advanced analytics in there, it wasn't. People would take their free term, and then at the end of the term, they'd wave goodbye, and they simply weren't renewing.
I think that's That's not so uncommon, right? Give the big discount, get them to join, but it's really about really demonstrating that value in the short time that they are in order to get them to stick around, right? It's not cut and dried, right? That as soon as they join for free, that they're automatically going to renew. So two questions about that. One is this growth, right? This kind of like really steep growth, for a number of years. To what do you attribute that growth?
So matching up member benefits to the demographics themselves. So we went on a very aggressive campaign, not only to maintain the current doctors that we had as members, but also to reaching out to the other groups in nephrology, the nurses, the dialysis technicians, et cetera. We started off with the free membership, thinking, okay, it's free, they'll like us enough, and they'll renew. That wasn't the case. Obviously, we need to find out why. So it really comes down to matching what they're specifically looking for in terms of benefits. Some of the content that we offer doctors is not going to be relevant for a nurse. It's not going to be relevant for a technician. So finding out what content they're looking for and then meeting that need and providing it to them has been a really big help in sort of our membership growth.
Yeah. Okay. And you did a lot of that, right? A lot of that was pre-Acumen, right? So you're doing that just with data that you had available in NetForum, correct?
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. And then the conversion from free to paid membership, or like this analysis of the weeks out, like that you had to do in order to determine when it comes to the events, like how much of that was being successful, like how were you able to measure those things?
So pivot charts all day long.
Okay.
We have the reporting capability in the sense that we could pull out unique data sets in NetForum, but there wasn't a whole lot of trending tools available. So what we would do is we'd often query it, we'd export it out to a CSV, we compared invoice amounts based on the free invoice versus a paid over years, grouped by the customer key, which is the primary identifier in NetForum, and then group them that way. And we were using Excel for any sort of analysis. Same with event registrations. We'd kind of run the weekly query, export it to a CSV, and then dump it into like a big master Excel spreadsheet to kind of trend it out over a period of time. Okay. So it worked, but it was tedious. It was manual and tedious, no doubt.
Got it. So it's labor intensive, right? But you guys had a maybe underutilized in a certain sense, right? Because you're spending time on kind of routine tasks in some ways, but you were able to move the needle. So that's great. So that's kind of a picture of how it was. I want to go and take a look at how it is right now. Right. So as we transition into the how it is, I want to come back to one thing, which is what are some, or maybe one even, like what are the main data related tasks that should remain in NetForum, right? So that even if even now that you're more or less implemented with Acumen, you're kind of already seeing some big benefits. What are some things that you'll continue to do in NetForum?
So I think anything that's non-trendable or static, the real power of a system like Acumen is the ability to look at data changes over a set time period, and of course the drill down with the different data points that are affected by that. Things like that, we as I mentioned, we have a lot of customization, a lot of custom data points, custom tables, etc. So for instance, we collect skills and competencies for our members. So we often want to identify spokespeople or people that are an expert in a particular subject matter of nephrology. So we would tie that into their CRM record in NetForum. And it's great to have, it helps us make decisions, but that doesn't necessarily translate into a trendable data set that we would pull over to Acumen.
All right. Good. Yeah. So, we have this conversation a lot. It's like, your day-to-day, right? Your transactional things should still be, your AMS is still the system of record for those things. You still need those point-to-point integrations with some of your other source systems. So you have that up-to-date data in your in NetForum, but when it comes to trending over time and those broader group, where you're looking at populations of individuals rather than single individuals, then those are the kinds of things where it is really helpful to have that external data repository. Okay, so now that you've implemented Acumen, just tell us a bit about just the major things that have changed for for ASN.
Yep. Well, the first one is we can now answer the question of how many members we had in year X. So that was a big one. Obviously, Acumen provides a more accurate approach to using they use the membership term data as opposed, which kind of bridges the two between the CRM and the membership module. So it's static data that's sitting there, it's time stamped on based on when the term occurred. So that right there it was a crazy shifting change for us. We didn't have to scramble anymore to find out what the numbers. And we knew the numbers were accurate. We knew that there was a single source of data, and we could rely on it without having to double check, et cetera. We're now using Acumen to uncover trends that dissuade some of the anecdotes that I mentioned we used previously, as well as to provide us with new ways to approach things. Quick example of that is our constituents are mostly academic. They're going to be academic researchers at university hospitals. So the academics are the typical bread and butter for our content. But we actually discovered through Acumen that all of our COVID-based webinars were attended largely by clinicians and people that dealt directly with patients rather than academics. So that was kind of eye-opening to us because clinicians previously were very select in sort of how they interacted with ASN. So, discovering trends like that. So we know that, okay, well, this is a viable content. I mentioned earlier, that's kind of our strategy is matching content to user interest based on their demographics. So it's been great that way. Another quick example is from a marketing standpoint, from our email system. So our Acumen deployment integrates into we use the Real Magnet or Magnet Mail system through Higher Logic. So it integrates in there so we can, they have their own reporting system, but like NetForums, it worked, but it's great to have the consolidated view that Acumen provides. We used to target Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday for our broadcast emails. Those are largely considered, the quote unquote popular days for email. But we actually found a lot of variances based on the message content once we started digging into the trends. For example, it turns out that our job posting emails were being opened mostly on Sunday, which I think is kind of akin to, reading the classifieds in the Sunday paper. I think that's when people like to do that thing. They've got their mind focused on something. We also noticed that messages with a financial call to action, like event registrations, were actually getting the click-throughs near the end of the week, regardless of when they sent. So if we sent it on Monday, they were clicking through on Friday. If they sent it on Tuesday, they were clicking through on Friday. Sort of the trend here that we discovered is people will often put it aside as a task that needs to be taken care of before they pack up for the weekend. So we were definitely seeing trends in that, which kind of defied how we used to do things. It's the kind of insights led our marketing staff to we have a lot of aha moments now. So like, oh, that's how it's working. We've got the data to unveil new trends or disprove or prove other trends that we kind of made decisions based on. And it's enabled us to do a lot more advanced segmentation based on the new trends as they emerge.
Awesome.
Yeah. So sorry, I talked a lot.
That's okay. No. I was just going to ask you, have these things kind of filtered up to the rest of the executive team yet? Has this kind of worked its way into the senior leadership communications?
Oh yeah, yep, absolutely. So we used to provide. I mean, we always kept our senior leadership in the loop with things. Well, we often would provide them with a lot of tabular data, which it's great. It gets the information, gets the numbers out in front of them, but doesn't necessarily tell the story. Particularly with our council, who's comprised of physicians. So they're not necessarily involved in the nuts and bolts and the business end of what our society is doing. Being able to provide them with more dashboards and visualizations really helps them understand what we're doing and how things are changing. It's been especially effective if we need to dissuade any sort of precedent or notion that we used to do things. It's like, hey, we're doing this way because this is the way that the trends tell us to do it. And they then have their own aha moments. It makes more sense to them.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So one thing that we hadn't really talked about, and it occurs to me that might be interesting for the group, is outside of the data that is coming from different source systems, including NetForum into Acumen. Tell us about the integrations, like those point-to-point integrations of your other source systems to NetForum. Right. With that, leaving Acumen aside, like what data is being pushed back and forth to NetForum?
So we originally were pushing back all of our email system in the NetForum from Magnet Mail. We actually had to turn that off because it blew
Yeah.
up our SQL server. Million. I mean, we send out a lot of email. It is our primary marketing channel, which I'm trying to get away from. No one likes to be spammed, but we got a lot of data from it. So we would push it back into NetForum. We had to turn that off. We had hundreds of millions of click-throughs, hundreds of millions of opens, et cetera. We do try to push most information into NetForum that specifically ties back to the individual. So if we can tie it to an individual, whether it's an action, whether it's a click-through, whether it's obviously anything financially related, we do try to get it into NetForum. So it is the record, the database of note where we can find anything that we need.
All right. Awesome. So for the audience, what's the one systems that's giving you trouble with integrations, right? Which one is giving your team a hard time getting data back into to NetForum? You can complain a little bit to the group meeting registrations. Yeah, and maybe you don't necessarily have to be specific with the product, but we're friends here, so if you want to do that, it's okay too. All right. So then I think what we'll do then is let's move to what is QuickBooks. Yeah, what's happening in the future, right? What are we looking forward to? So I think in our conversation, one of the first things that you had mentioned is engagement, right? So let's start there. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we're relatively new Acumen customers, and the last module that was deployed was the engagement module. We just started using it, so it's something that I've long wanted to do. NetForum has something similar, but with this engagement module, it's going to help us identify who's interacting with us the most. I mean, this is going to be a key in almost all of our targeted campaigns where we're looking for people that are involved with ASN. So anywhere from our fundraising and giving efforts to identifying volunteers for positions within the organization. For example, like committee repopulation. The engagement module is going to tell us exactly who these people are, then we know how to get a hold of them and what they're doing.
Yeah, awesome. So were you trying to do something with engagement tracking prior to Acumen, like doing something just with NetForum data, or you were using A-score or anything like that?
We were. So we attempted to implement A-score, and it was a mess from a number of reasons. It wasn't capturing the full picture of what we wanted it to. So obviously we were able to get things like, event registrations in there and hitting the score, but it was all over the place. The decay rate wasn't working properly. A lot of the workflows, and they're not necessarily technical problems, but it wasn't providing us with the information that we wanted, and it was definitely not easy to set up. That was the biggest thing. So at the time, my marketing staff was in charge of setting that up, and it is a non-technical setup in the sense that you've got a GUI interface, that sort of thing. You're not in there writing underlying SQL, but at the same time, you really need to understand some of the structure that we need that is going to write a score in, and not all of it is at the surface. So we struggled a lot with that. We ultimately ended up ditching it. We could not rely. We just couldn't rely on it to really give us an accurate view of who was engaged and who wasn't.
All right. Yes, I want to be fair about engagement. This is one that we talk about a lot. I think that the way we do it is really, really good and smart. However, I want to ask in the audience if anyone has used A-score effectively, and if they're fans and promoters of that. I saw John Chapman was on here, and I think John has done some good things with A-score. So if you want to come on and tell us about that, that would be great. So next thing in terms of what you're looking forward to is this idea of the industry, right? Where trends in your workforce, I think was the term. So tell us more about that, because I think that's something that that is a underappreciated benefit of having something like Acumen, is that it's not only about, hey, member benefits, like what kind of courses did I take and that sort of stuff, but bringing in industry data, and especially if you can use that for the benefit of your members, or maybe even for the public, right? With the unique expertise that your association brings to it. So anyway, hopefully I didn't steal anything that you're about to say, but tell us
No,
about
you
workforce trends.
queued it up nice. So yeah, so one of the things we want to do with engagement, obviously, is discern workforce trends in nephrology. And by workforce trends, I mean the trends of people that are actually going from trainee into nephrology and becoming active nephrologists. Nephrology is actually the second least popular internal medicine subspecialty. We get a large number of folks that start their nephrology training, but then switch off to another subspecialty or career before they actually start practice. So oftentimes they'll start off as in medical school, they'll be very interested in the kidney, et cetera, and then they jump off to go to cardiology or something else that may be a little more glamorous than the kidney, according to them. So obviously, this is the future of our membership. So we're very interested in finding out who these people are, why they didn't continue with nephrology, and really pinpoint the different areas and levels of where engagement starts to drop off, so that we can do something about that, obviously, and address the declining workforce.
Yeah. So, well, so first of all, I have to ask, what's the least popular if nephrology is the second?
Geriatric medicine.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. No disrespect if there's anyone. I believe the American Geriatric Society is it's either a prospect or maybe even a new customer of ours. So anyway, so we'll have to have that conversation.
They can use the engagement module.
There we go. There we go. Okay, so this is interesting. So how do you know that if I'm like a prospect, or maybe I'm even a member, like how do you know that I've switched to another subspecialty?
So it is hard. What we can measure is when the engagement drops off. Obviously, when they stop interacting with us, when they don't register for our meetings, they don't open our emails, et cetera. Finding out if they actually move to another subspecialty is a little difficult at the moment. So the AMA, the American Medical Association, does put out a big registration list that is available to people. We have tried cross-matching it, and we are in the process of doing that. But the problem is having a unique ID that spans all systems. There is one called the ORCID ID, which a lot of doctors use, but we do offer that. We hold it in NetForum as a data point, but we don't require it, obviously. So matching it to some of the data that we get from AMA has been it's been useful, but less than accurate. We don't yet have the complete picture of who has left, but it's something that we are working on and building.
Yeah, I mean that's you've already experienced like pretty major growth just by like the blocking and tackling type stuff with your better matching, aligning your services, products and services with your members, just with the group that you're already in touch with, but being able to retain some of those that would otherwise switch, or even to get some back, that might have switched would be amazing. So that brings up, some things that are like topics of whole other, webinars in themselves, but like, for example, your data collection protocols, right? Like, like ORCID ID is not required, it's optional. So what are some ways that you can, you could make it required, right? Obviously that would be one, but what are some good ways that you could collect that, and maybe you have 50% of them now, but you can get up to 80% with some minor changes, right? Where you can request it on event registrations or something like that. Maybe you can, survey, people with micro surveys. There's all kinds of ways that you can collect data that you need or that you want, but you should do that in the context of connecting it to something strategic, right? So this is a good example. It's like, hey, ORCID IDs may be difficult to get, but look at all the benefit that we can get, from that if we're able to populate that better. So really interesting. So okay. So any other thing that you wanted to mention by way of things that you're looking forward to in terms of next steps?
Yeah, so we are looking forward to implementing the My Acumen module. When we first did the rollout, we did not have it, but it's going to allow us to do the customizations. I mentioned earlier with NetForum, I love NetForum so much as the extensibility and the ability that I have to customize things. We're up and running with Acumen. We're relatively new customers. We've got a good baseline data in a centralized, consolidated location. We're excited to build the customizations now to take us where we really want to be, which is, of course, having the ability to predict the future, which is what all this is about, is figuring out the trends and what's going to happen next. So my team, my technical team's excited about it. My marketing team's excited about it. I think we all are.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, so I'll have some more to say about that at the very end, but I actually want to pivot for a sec. We have a question in the Q&A. This is from Andy, and he says he was looking at his Acumen email module and he realized that they need to adjust their categories, right? So how do they categorize their emails? And the question is, can you say a little more about how you categorize emails? So
Yep. So the way we do it is we categorize them within the real magnet system based on, I think the data point is called category, and it's only a single data point. So we're actually using a hyphenated system to determine what campaign it is and what the target is and what the appeal is. So that does filter in. It's not the most ideal situation for tagging because it is just that single string that's hyphenated. But it does allow us, when we do any sort of trending or exporting, we can break it out. I can programmatically, obviously, parse it out into different pieces of the string based on the hyphenation. But we try to make sure that we are tying it back to the demographics and then whatever the appeal is, so that that will vary based on what we're offering, what we're marketing.
yeah, so yes, thank you. So I would say, Andy, that in more generically, that we offer, and even if you don't have a tool like Acumen, you kind of look at it as a hierarchy. Like, think about your product hierarchy, and maybe they start off, like, from an email perspective, might start off at the departmental level, and then it would go down to like the promotion level, right? So what is the specific campaign or specific promotion within the department? And then the next level might be subject, right? So you might have events, and then you might have the specific event, and then you have the subject, right? It's early bird registration, something like that. So 3 or 4 levels, and it's kind of loosely corresponds to the way that you would do, you categorize, like use your UTM codes in marketing, right? So you have the source or the media, and then you go to the promotion, and then maybe have like something specific about the message there. So they're related, and it doesn't have to match up exactly, but come up with a hierarchy that works and that you can drill down so you have an appropriate level of granularity for looking at those results. Okay, so Andy is different. Andy is asking, with all these data points and insights, how can you leverage the info to tailor content to your members and prospects via email, right? So how did you do that, right? How did you, I can answer it from an Acumen perspective, probably you could too, but even without Acumen, you were doing some of this. Tell us again how you managed all that.
Yeah, basically using the tracking. So we embed UTM codes. We also use NetForum source code mechanism, which I don't know if a lot of people use that or not. But we embed that in all of our financial transaction email marketing. So when they click through, it actually will tie it in and write it into the invoice in NetForum when they go and do the full conversion to make a purchase. So figuring out with all the different data points, which ones are the most important, I think, because I mean, you get a lot of different data points, all different kinds of trends of who's looking into what are the most important based on what your current campaign is. So if it's a financial transaction or conversion campaign, we tend to look at the source code. How is that working? Is it being implemented correctly? Are people clicking through? And if not, why? Or why not, I guess.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, tell us a little bit more, and not us, right? Because it's really, maybe I'm the only one that doesn't know about this, but the source that you talked about, like what is that used for exactly?
The source code?
Yeah, source code.
Yeah. So it's basically tagging. NetForum has the source code. It's a generalized tag that you can write into anything. You can tag an event registration with it. You can tag an invoice with it, et cetera, et cetera. We like to use it to tag invoices. So it'll get picked up, and we actually pass it around to all of our different systems, including we use a third-party vendor for our annual meeting, and the source code will get picked up with a click through, and we pass it to the vendor system to make sure that they write it in to the full transaction, so that we can then use that to obviously track if the conversion's working or not.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Okay, got one more question from John, and then we're going to go to pro tips. Of course, we'll take some more questions there at the end. So John is saying, in your experience with Acumen, what's the tipping point where you determine whether to continue a specific solution like a chart or a list or some kind of data within Acumen versus choosing a solution path that's outside. So have you encountered things that that are tough or that you can't do in Acumen, and have you had to move outside it for other types of solutions?
Luckily, we haven't so far. So as I mentioned, we are relatively new with Acumen. My goal is to get everything into Acumen for some of the things that we went outside of NetForum for back in the day. So far, it's fitting all of our needs. We haven't seen anything that's so complex that we have to go outside of it that hasn't fit within the data points that we have available to us within Acumen that we're pulling over from NetForum. So I guess we've been lucky there. My advice would be to try to force things into Acumen as much as possible. And what I mean by that is, as soon as you go down the road of having disjointed data stores, disjointed reports, et cetera, you're back to where you were at the beginning before you had the consolidated system, which is someplace we don't want to go.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay. So we're going to go to pro tips. I'll turn my screen back on for a sec. So this is pro tips with Hal. I'm going to let you take it away, and then maybe I'll follow up with a question or two.
Yeah, so some of the pro tips just with using Acumen itself, if and when you guys decide to join with them, is some of the overlap modules. So again, we've got this different information in different modules of NetForum, but being able to watch them overlap and see how that works is really key to identifying trends as well as identifying engagement with users. There's an events overlap, there's a sales overlap. It's a great way to determine sort of your repeat customers who are going to be, the ones that pay the bills with all the things that they buy. Yeah. Another one that's been really powerful is discerning implicit interest through action in the community. So we, as part of the membership demographic profile, we collect what area of nephrology they're interested in, whether it's CKD or dialysis, et cetera. So people will self-identify that information. And we found that for the most part, that is pretty accurate. Obviously, people are going to let us know when they're into something, but finding the implicit interest through user action through the communities has been really eye-opening. So someone may say that they're interested in one area, and then they spend all their time commenting in some area, the other area. We know, okay, well that's a great data point. This person is clearly into this particular area of nephrology. And back to Andy's earlier question about leveraging the info to tailor content. I mean, that's a great way. Finding the implicit interest that you can discern through things like the communities module is a great way to meet them with what they're actually looking for without them telling you what they're looking for. Yeah. And then another one is there's a module in Acumen called the Pulse dashboard, which is kind of like it's a big dashboard. It's multifaceted across kind of all the modules. I recommend you work that into your morning routine as you start your workday. That's what I do every morning as I start my coffee. It's a great way to see what you've got going on across all the board. And I spend a lot of my time in meetings. More is the pity. But I often have meetings across all departments, and kind of looking through the Pulse dashboard is a great way to just kind of prepare me when I'm giving reports or whatever, ad hoc reports to the different teams to give the overall arching view of how things are going at that moment. So it's a great tool. Awesome.
Thank you so much. Those are great tips. I want to steer back for a second to, right, so some of us on have Acumen, some don't. So give us a tip or two for those of us that are NetForum users but don't yet have Acumen.
So number one is learn the data object model. So NetForum has got over 1,000 baseline tables, and most users are not even aware of their existence, what they do, nor and most of these tables are not even exposed in the GUI interface of the query tool. Once you really understand the structure, it'll unlock what you can do with your querying and reporting. Particularly using some of the advanced subqueries to pull data or connect data from different modules or different areas, et cetera. Number two is allow users to manipulate data. So I try to write all my queries and reports using ask it runtime variables. So instead of having everything hard coded, when they go to run it, it'll ask them, okay, select this from a dropdown, which allows them to kind of manipulate the query a little bit, and they can apply different scenarios to it and easily adjust the output to fit their needs. And number three is use the audience tool in NetForum. It's a very common request is to combine query results from two different queries or reports, either to include both groups in something or to determine overlap to exclude a particular subset of them. The audience tool is great for the non-technical user. Again, it's got a GUI interface You can combine queries from different modules, combine queries from the same module, et cetera. And it's pretty powerful, but it doesn't get a whole lot of exposure. So a lot of people, my own staff included, don't even know about it.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll on the follow-up, this is a note for Katrina. Let's add those in. Those pro tips for NetForum. Those are really good. So one thing that I was thinking about is, that related to that reporting bottleneck is, right, one of the problems is you get a lot of requests that are quite similar, and what I see, with our customers and prospects, that normally means a really long list of custom queries and reports, right? So how many do you, I think, I can't remember the number. I think it was like 100 or something. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it was around 100 to 150, which I thought was a crazy amount. But
Yeah.
you were telling me that I'm on the low end of some of your clients. So
Yeah, so the highest number I've seen is around 650 to 700. But so are there any? Yeah, so I think you're doing pretty well at 100 to 150. So any advice? Because I expect that other people are dealing with that as well. Any advice on how to keep that to a manageable number, right? Is it about like really asking tough questions like when the request comes in, or is it like, do you go through and clean it out periodically, or what do you recommend?
a little bit of both. I mean, the best way I like to approach it is to work backwards. So figure out what data you actually need that's going to be useful. A lot of times people automatically throw in every single demographic data point that they have in there, but you have to think, okay, well, what am I going to be using this data for? What decisions do I need to make, and how do I get there? What data set is going to provide the information I need for that? Once you've got that, then try to figure out, okay, well, what are the different scenarios that can change? What are the data points that need to be adjusted, especially year to year? So figuring out if you're looking at anything that targets geographic data, being able to do something as simple as change the zip code in a query. Now suddenly you can use this one query for any application for any event that happens in a different zip code without having to write a new one that's hard coded every single time. And then clean up. So a lot of the queries are one-time use only, and people don't even realize it. They think it's what they need. They'll forget that they wrote it. They forget that they requested it. Going through periodically, which we try to do. We actually try to do that about every 90 days in our system. Try to review what's out there. The most important thing about that is obviously, sorting through 600, 800 queries is not going to be easy anyway, but it also runs the risk of having outdated data. So if you've got a query that was written at a time where it may have been accurate back in 2017, but something's changed since then, if someone stumbles across this query, they may be returning incorrect data, which we don't want.
Great point. Okay, so we got 2 minutes left here. I think this is the last question for me is, so you brought up like this idea of non-technical staff kind of being able to explore and find things. And initially we were talking about it in Acumen, but then we kind of came around to NetForum as well. You want people to be able to manipulate things. So my last question then is about adoption, right? So for non-technical users, do you have any tips? Because I know everyone is struggling with that. Do you have any tips on how to get non-technical staff to use or adopt new things, right? Whether it be Acumen or whether it be like getting comfortable with NetForum or whatever the technology, anything that's, you have a lot of technologies under your purview there. So any tips that you would share?
Yeah, sure. They're pretty simple. Number one is make it easy. People are going to be impatient, and if they perceive having to exert any more effort than they did previously on something, they're not going to perceive it as useful. That's the number one key right there. Number two is make it pretty. UI, UX goes a long way. I say that my background is as a web designer and developer, so of course I'm partial to that, but it really does. If someone sees something that is not, aesthetically pleasing, or it looks ugly or something, they're not that likely to engage with it. They're going to be a little hands off. And then the last is make it make sense. Keep familiar terminology. Try not to get overly technical. Keep the same technology or terminology that you had in the previous system, kind of as much as you can. Match it up to the new system. Match it up to new technology so that people don't feel unfamiliar. When people are in an unfamiliar situation, they get shy, for lack of a better term, and they may not want to explore it and try to figure out what the terminology means. One of the things I learned about that we try to apply is actually something called the technology acceptance model, which I won't bore you guys with all the specifics, but it's a theory of that models how users come to accept new technology. And the two components are perceived usefulness and perceived ease of use. And both of those two factors are really going to weigh heavily on a new system and the users, and when you roll it out, how they're going to accept it. So if you guys haven't heard of that, I recommend you kind of Google it and check it out. It's been really useful as a tool for us.
I could see some kind of like magic quadrant, like Gartner magic quadrant with ease of use, and I'm sure they have something like that.
Yeah, 100%. Finding where that intersection is. That's your sweet spot.
All right. Awesome. So yeah, that's where we're going to leave it. If anybody's interested in taking a look at Acumen, you can schedule a demo on our site. Want to thank Hal Nesbit for joining us. I mean, I personally learned a lot in this conversation. I hope the audience did as well. And join us again. We have the engagement revolution panel coming up in a few weeks. We hope to see you all there. So again, Hal, thanks again. And we look forward to talking to you all again very soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, Bill.